Good evening and welcome to the Modise Network.
On this Youth Day, we take a look at the levels of transformation across sporting codes in South Africa with Dr. Somadoda Fikeni. Later on, Forbes Africa's 30 under 30 business entrepreneurs, Roger Boniface and Jack Mtembu, join me on the couch. And jazz pianist and composer Tandine Tuli pays us a visit ahead of her performance at the National Arts Festival that's going to open next week.
I'm Tim Modise and thank you for joining me this evening. Many South Africans will recall the iconic moment when former President Nelson Mandela lifted the Rugby World Cup trophy in 1995. And this past weekend, another historic moment occurred when Siya Kolisi was appointed the first black Springbok captain, leading his team to a win over England. Nelson Mandela believed that transformation in sport would advance the cause of reconciliation and nation building. But this has been slow and contentious. One of the people who've been advancing the cause of transformation for reconciliation is Dr. Somadoda Fikeni, the former chair of the Eminent Persons Group for Transformation in Sports. He joins us this evening. Dr. Fikeni, pleasure to have you talk to us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you, Tim, and greetings to your viewers.
Well, at least a little bit of light and a shining moment experienced this past week when Siya Kolisi was appointed the first black captain of the Springbok rugby team. Does this mean that the road to transformation within rugby has now ended and that the goal has been achieved?
Not at all. Just having one flower does not announce the arrival of spring. It is actually a shame that 24 years after our freedom, we could be celebrating a captain drawn from 90% of the population of the nation being the first one as such. Instead, it should tell us that all people are capable, and when given a chance, they will actually advance the cause of sports. But when sport becomes elitist and it is confined to a particular population group, the nation will not be pulling on all its engines.
But now the moment arrived and a lot of people were happy, and of course to put the cherry on top, South Africa won against England, and as we speak they are playing again in the Free State. So what are the bigger challenges that you encountered when you were doing your work as part of the Eminent Persons Group? What exactly is holding the reconciliation and transformation process back within the sporting sector?
I do think that the biggest is attitude and a mental block, where people thought that transformation was a necessary evil to go through. And as such, when they are given targets, when they are asked to transform, they do it grudgingly, doing the bare minimum for symbolic reasons, and also putting a stigma on those who are being brought on board as being affirmative action appointment. In fact, in such instances, they fail to understand the history of sports. In boxing, the likes of Johnson in the heavyweight were prevented from fighting with the whites. The likes of Joe Louis would have been prevented, and Muhammad Ali. But when sports in boxing allowed many people to participate, you could see different racial groups, including those who had been excluded, excelling. The same with Tiger Woods in golf, the same with Williams sisters in tennis. So the biggest challenge there was the mental attitude. And the second one was the fact that people were not interested, or some were not capable of collecting data to indicate where transformation is, so that they can track it, they can tell if it is declining or not. And the third one is often the South African story. We do agree on certain things, but we fail to implement. South Africa is littered with the bones of good intention and policies, but implementation will always fall short, and that is due to institutional capacity, but more important, it's the lack of will to do those things. I can go on a range of issues, including the infrastructure, including opportunities, and the whole value chain of transformation, because it doesn't just end with people who are on the pitch. You look at the officials who are overseeing that particular code, you look at the procurement processes, you look at the facilities availed to people from different backgrounds.
Now, cricket seems to have done relatively well, especially over the past 5-6 years or so, because more and more stars are emerging in cricket than you know, any other sporting code. I'm talking about the black players now. They're becoming commonplace, so to speak. They're no longer that unique as they used to be not so long ago.
Certainly, you do have to understand the social history of some of these sporting codes. If, for example, you take rugby, you'll find that the communities, especially from the Afrikaner background, tended to be associated with that particular sports, and as such it defined part of their national identity, whatever that could have been. So you will find that the sponsors, you find that the people who are in leadership and so forth may resist anything that they see as a hostile takeover instead of celebrating diversity. Then you do have other sports, of course, where you find that people being channeled through certain high schools, through certain communities and clubs, they tend to prefer certain people such that by the time you get into national sport teams, you only will have seen some of these individuals who are from the usual mainstream dominant groups in those sports. But cricket itself, I do think that after a lot of struggles, not it being perfect, has actually strived to present some kind of diversity with some excellence.
Now, as we speak, the World Cup is on, and South Africa has once again failed to qualify for the World Cup. We're talking transformation in sport here. Football has not been under pressure to transform one way or another, but somehow one could argue that we need some transformation there to make sure that the national team becomes a winning team. They've been disappointing fans for some time. What is your view following the work that you've done interacting with the administrators and other role players in the sporting sector?
We raise the issue of leadership within soccer and administration as being a key element, as well as the politics within that particular code. Because once you do have the same leaders who are in the leadership and governance of sports also having their own teams, having an interest, very often you'll have tension between the two. And again, the issue of players being sent overseas and how you coordinate their availability for the national teams is another issue, and coaching is another issue that is there. You also have a critical mass because it's a very popular sport. Pressures build very quickly when a club loses, and that often translates into a pressure to the leaders or the soccer bosses, who may then remove the coach even before you have seen the impact and the results. So South Africa, if they want to be a sports superhouse like Australia and many others, will have to integrate schools, community sports, as well as the professional sport in a seamless fashion, because right now the focus might be on the national teams without looking at the value chain and the feeder and the socialization and grooming.
Stay with us, Dr. Fikeni. After the break, we take a look at the interventions made by the Department of Sports and Recreation to meaningfully transform sports in South Africa, and be part of the conversation by using the hashtag Modise Network on Twitter.